Hello there, ICS4C folks. Welcome to lesson 2.2, which corresponds roughly to the second part of the first Code Academy lesson for this unit, which they called arrays and objects. The first lesson was on arrays, which was mostly review, and this one is on this mysterious thing called objects, which we'll see is very important. You've got a word processor document open in front of you. I'm using Smart Notebook, but you don't have to. There's not as much arrows and stuff like that as in the last lesson, so if you're just using word processor, that should be fine. One thing I want to mention is I am going to be going back and forth between this and some JavaScript code. If you want to use JSBin, that's fine. I'm going to use not Smart Notebook. I'm going to use Notepad++ this time, just so you can see how that works. Remember, when we use Notepad++, we need to have a little JavaScript skeleton, and I'm sure this will be on Edmodo, or hopefully you've got a copy of it, or you can see it there. Remember, it has a link to, the HTML has a link to your JavaScript file, and we'll know to run that. You know, there's our JavaScript that I'll be using later. You don't have to copy that now. So I'm going to be using Notepad instead of JSBin this time. All right, off we go. A huge part of programming in the real world is object-oriented programming, or OOP for short. And what is this object business all about? Well, we're going to see today and then in the next little while. We'll just get an introduction to it today. An object is a data structure that allows a programmer to combine variables and functions into one. And that sounds pretty vague. Like, what the heck does that mean? Kind of sounds like a program, right? We have data and functions in a program. Well, an object is kind of something that we build on. And I think of them as records and stuff that we want to be able to do on a record, but that's kind of an old school way of thinking of things. But you'll see as we go more and more about what an object is. And I'm hoping that you'll just, once we get to it, say that's an object, that's a big deal. Who cares? What's so hard about that? If that's the case, you've got it. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a different way of thinking about data and functions. So the next sentence, we'll get an introduction to objects today and expand on this knowledge in the coming weeks. So this is a huge thing in the real programming world, and we're just going to get introduced. So make sure you try lots of stuff and ask lots of questions, and struggle more than a little bit. But like I said, I hope that it's not a struggle. I hope it's you shrug your shoulders and say no big deal. Of course, you have seen some of it in Code Academy already as well. All right, next slide. Creating an object. So we're actually going to make an object here, and I'm going to have sort of two parts to this. There's going to be the general syntax. The general is going to be on the left over here, and an example. So in general, and then there's more note there, so ignore this for now. Pretend you can't see that. This is the syntax. We have the keyword var, and then an object name. An object name, we pick that. That's not a JavaScript keyword. Var, of course, is equals and curly brackets with a semicolon, and then there's a bunch of stuff in the middle that I'll talk about in a second. But the key here is the curly brackets. Remember, square brackets, what did that show? That showed an array, usually. Curly brackets is an object. In the middle are what we call key and value pairs. So a key is something that we'd like to know about this object name thing, whatever it's called. And key 2 is another. And value are the values of those attributes or properties. We could think of them as keys. Properties, attributes, sometimes I'll call them fields. All those are sort of stuff that we want to keep track of with respect to this object. So you say, what the heck are you talking about, Resto? I'm not following. Well, and then we need an example. So for instance, we might have FIRD record. So this is FIRD record is the name of the object, and this is essentially going to be all the data that we're storing about FIRD, which FIRD happens to be a student. And we see the curly brackets equals curly brackets. That means we're talking about an object. And there are all the key value pairs. So the key is a first name. That's something we'd like to know about FIRD. Last name, student, num, and marks are all things we'd like to know. Their values are on the right-hand side. And notice they're separated by a colon and commas in between. We can sort of make the connection to our previous knowledge by, this is kind of like an array where instead of a subscript 0, subscript 1, subscript 2, we're giving the addresses of the array a name, where third has the value, is the value of first name. First name is the spot, the element spot in the object that we're going to keep track, and third is the value. Okay? Notice that these things, these keys can be any data type that we like, including in this, our very first example, marks happens to be an array with 4 elements in it. And I'm going to get to the example here shortly. But it can be anything. And in fact, we'll see later in the week, or maybe next week, that these things can be functions. They can be stuff to do instead of data itself. All right. So I'm going to, if you've got the typed out, copy it, copy this, because I'm going to go to my JavaScript now. This is my JavaScript, and here's my JavaScript program. This defines an object called third record, and then there are all the key value pairs. And it's all saved up, so if I were actually to launch this, run this in Chrome, I got a bunch of them open now. So, this is the, I have to press F12, remember, to see the console. Nothing happened. Okay, Restall, why did nothing happen? Well, it's because we didn't ask anything to happen, right? In our JavaScript, nothing's going on. So for instance, we could print something out to the console, right? If I wanted to print out third record dot first name, or notice this could be last name or student number or whatever. I could print out whatever I want to. This is going to print it out to the console. Save that. Go to my Chrome and refresh. There. And it tells me, you know, the first name and the that's the part in the JavaScript that called that. So in JSBin it doesn't work, but in JSBin that would work as well. If we wanted to print out something else, well, then we could do a different console log. So for instance, if I want to, what would happen? Gotta type it right. If I did that, well, that's going to be this entire array of marks. And I'm going to refresh that just to show you. There's the array of marks. What happens if I wanted just to print out one of the marks? Well, I'd have to use the square bracket notation to access the array, just like we reviewed yesterday. So we could do that. Right? If I just wanted to print off one mark, refresh that, and notice we could put them in if statements and loops and all that stuff, just like we learned last year. Objects can work that way as well. All right, Danny, let's get some of this stuff into our notes. And I'm going to go back to the example again. So it says that printed out third, that printed out 39. What happens if we just print out the entire third record, the entire object? It says it prints all key value pairs. Well, what the heck does that mean? Well, let's try it. Instead of a particular key or attribute or field, whatever, these things, I'll call them 100 different things. I'll call them attributes, I'll call them keys, I'll call them fields, I'll call them properties. They all kind of mean the same thing. I hope that's not confusing, but the object itself is on the left-hand side of the dot, and the attribute or key is on the right-hand side. But what happens if I want to print out the entire object? Save that and refresh, and let's have a look. Well, there, it prints out. It printed out the first name because I never kept that in the program. But then it says an object, and it gives me all the keys in purple, and then all the values in, well, red for strings, blue for integers. And notice it didn't even give me the array. It just told me that it was an array with 4 elements and didn't tell me about it. Well, I think in JSBin it actually prints out the entire array, and there's a little bit of difference between that, but that doesn't matter. All right, dandy. What's next? So, well, instead of dot, this is what's called dot notation. And we've seen dot notation when we dealt with arrays and other things. Well, console.log, right? So actually console, believe it or not, is actually an object, but we're not going to go there now. We can use square brackets. So for instance, we can make it look a little like an array if we put it in square brackets. Notice the quotes though. So instead of the dot notation, I could use square brackets and quotes and quotes. Okay. Well, why would we want to do that? Well, just for a variety of ways of doing things, and we'll see that there'll be an advantage of this at some point. I'm going to comment that out and save this, refresh, just to show you that that still works, and of course it does. Okay, so square brackets and quotes. Now what happens if I left off the quotes? Well, it would give me an error, because it would say something like first name is not defined or something. Well, it's there. Now first name is a key of that object. Right now it doesn't know it. If I use dot notation, it would know. If I put it in quotes, it would know. But right now it doesn't. So save that, refresh, and I should get an error message. Uncaught reference error. First name is not defined, so I have to put it in quotes. Mental note. All right, Danny, what's next? Oh, third record, quote, locker equals W123. So, well, there is no locker key. Well, what this line does, it actually assigns a new one. So if I go back to my JavaScript here, third record, and I could use dot locker. I could do it that way. Just I'm still showing the square bracket notation. Now, that's making a new key, and then I want to give it a value. I make my quotes be the same kind. And then I want to print that out so it actually shows you that it's a new value. Save that, refresh. Oh, did I not save that? I did save it. Oh, but I didn't comment this. I'm going to comment that one out and save it. That old line that I had the error on, right? That's where it got stuck. So refresh. And there, it shows me the object, and then there's the new key value pair. So that's how I could add new details about an object that already exists. Notice that if I wanted to, I could use the same style or dot notation. It doesn't matter. So say Ferg got married and changed his last name to Smith. That would, and then I could change the data about my object as well. Save that, refresh just to show you that that works. Bam, there it is. Ferg's last name is Smith now. Dandy. Oh, there's one more sentence just to tell you that. So the second line shows us that we can add key value pairs to an existing object. And in fact, this leads us into the second way. Remember, this was the first way to create an object called literal notation. And we'll see in video 2 the second way of creating objects. That's in video 2.